Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Blue Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm here with Millie, and today we're going to talk about why spirituality can feel like such a turnoff. And we came across this. Well, actually, I wanted to bring this topic in because I have a lot of people telling me why spirituality feels woo woo and why it's annoying. And you see so many memes about spirituality being obnoxious or spiritual teachers being obnoxious. This year, I saw Halloween costumes that were about like spiritual identities, and like different costumes, like with how different spiritual teachers or spiritual people might identify. And I was like, yeah, that's about right. I thought it was such an exaggeration, but it was like funny because, like anything else, spirituality it can be full of ego. We
Yeah.
can all have ego in anything. Spirituality has a shadow. It's full of ego. Um, so I wanted to discuss this because you know how important spirituality is to Millie and I. And I thought it would be great to acknowledge that some people feel this way and to discuss why. And maybe we don't need to change anybody's mind, but maybe we can bring a different viewpoint into this, have a different conversation around it. But first, we're going to talk about the astrology that's happening now that might support this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to understand the astrology right now because it does give context to the egoic part that is in fact I would say that is in fact attempting to die. And I say that because we can see out in the world a lot of how an old way of being, we're trying to grip onto it. We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to grip on an old way of being, an old way of living life, an old way of running institutions, running countries, democracy. And there's this very now outdated way that people are no longer resonating with. And I believe that that has a lot to do with the fact that more and more people are actually getting in touch with their spirituality, they're elevating consciousness. But I don't think that a lot of people have the words for that yet. But that's an exciting thing that you can see, that you can sense it. People are asking different questions, but they don't have the words for it yet. And so that part right there is so important. That part where people are at, where they feel differently, where they feel disconnected from an old way that is trying to be held on to, that's such a sensitive point in someone's evolution, spiritual evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are in a space of egoic spirituality, it's a little scary because it can become another egoic construct.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, we're recording this on November 12th, and we are 5 days away, no, 7 days away, excuse me, from Pluto finally leaving the sign of Capricorn and moving into the sign of Aquarius.
Thank God.
Yes. And Pluto in Capricorn has represented so much of what has been created over the last 16, 20 years, 16 to 20 years, I would say. A lot of it has been a growth of corporation. It has been a growth of people venturing out for themselves, people creating businesses, being industrious. Um, if we're looking at this from a very practical perspective, it was people trying to make something of life, something of their material life, in order to gain some kind of um, material security, right? And in the collective, that was a very strong belief. That was like the tried and true belief. That was like the map of that you followed in order to be considered successful. Only two over the last 4 years for that to come crumbling down, because Pluto represents the shadow of anything it builds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I say that because Pluto isn't just the shadow. Pluto is the empowerment that comes deep from within us when we take a moment to look deeply within ourselves and integrate the light and the shadow. And that the way that I'm saying it feels so simplistic, but it's anything but, right? It's an ongoing, it's a lifelong journey, really. So I think one of the things that Pluto represents is the impermanence of things, the
Mm.
impermanence of life. And so when things are impermanent and we can remember that, then if we can accept that as a fact, as a truth of life, then we don't grip onto anything in the same way, but we hold it with a different reverence on a day to day. So that part right there is, as we move into Pluto and Aquarius, pop astrology is is really focusing on like AI and robots and technology. And yes, we're going to see that. We're absolutely going to see that. What that's going to look like, I have no idea. My brain can't fathom. And to be quite honest, it's not something I concern myself with very much, right? It's not that it's not important, but I don't think about it. It's going to be what it's going to be. But on a personal level, Pluto in Aquarius is, what is the empowerment of questioning? How are you empowered by questioning the things that have built your life thus far, the
Mm.
constructs that you have built your life from thus far? How are you empowered to tap into the essence of who you are and show up genuinely in your life day to day and from that space? How are you empowered to live your life in accordance to what feels the most authentic to you?
Mm.
So I break it down in this way because this is what, to me, this is one of the components of spirituality, to be present enough with everything, to be present enough with everything that is falling apart, and recognizing how difficult that in fact is, right? What parts of us are being shed with that, but what is asking to be reborn?
Mm.
What is asking to come from us in a different way?
Mm.
And I bring it in this way because this to me feels like a much more honest expression of the Pluto transit that we're experiencing. And Pluto at its last leg of Capricorn, I would say this has been an ongoing feeling, definitely through the month of partly September, October, November, of death.
Mm.
There has been a feeling of death, whether it's you've had thoughts about death, or you can understand, oh, that career is dying, that relationship is dying, right? This place that I'm living in, like, that's dying. I'm transitioning onto something else. There is a theme of death that Pluto brings when it makes huge transitions. So this isn't just about like a sigh of relief. This is about being with the experience of the transformation that is actually happening within you, and how fucked up that feels sometimes.
Mm.
It's not an easy feeling to move with.
No.
And to me, spirituality is the acknowledgement of those death and rebirth processes that we experience multiple times throughout our human lifetime. And this is one of those times. And
Mm.
so I'm personally spending a lot less time on social media, but whenever I go on there, the way that some of these things are portrayed is very superficial, and I think it doesn't do justice for the part of people that that is dying. There is
Mm.
something dying in all of us right now. It
Yes.
looks differently. We have different levels of attachment to the things that are dying, like, but there is that.
Mm.
And while there is something difficult about it, there's also something very sacred about it. And spirituality is about remembering, I think, that the sacredness in those, especially those moments. And I think that's where the astrology has us right now. this transition between Pluto, the last leg of Pluto, and then Pluto finally moving into Aquarius. It's that profound feeling of death.
Mm.
And now, another thing I'll say is Pluto moving into Aquarius isn't like this rejoicing, like, yeah, we're liberated.
No.
It's it's a rebirth. We will have to learn again to live.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that comes with its own soul journey. I hope I'm not too doom and gloom here. I just think that there is something so important about minding the process of who we become when we listen to things like astrological transits. It's one thing to know, yeah, Pluto's leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius. Venus is now in Capricorn. Like, okay, but what does that mean to you? How does that feel in your body? What are the thoughts that are coming up? What are the feelings that are coming up? How is your body responding on the day to day? And how do you hold yourself in a way that where you know you're not going to necessarily be debilitated by all of this, but you're absolutely honoring it? Yeah.
Well, from where I'm sitting, I don't think you sound doom and gloom, but I've walked through my own death process and rebirth. I've walked with Pluto my whole life and will continue to walk it during this life.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's our culture's unwillingness to
Yeah.
look at death, to look at shadow, to face difficult things, to face discomfort that has brought us to this point.
Mhm.
We are built from an early age. It is, don't feel sad, don't be angry, don't feel this, don't feel that. I
Mhm.
just spoke to someone in my neighborhood and he was like, yeah, we just can't get angry. I take medicine so I'm not angry. And I'm like, that is not okay.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. I just out there, I know that medicine can be helpful, but when we're taking medicine to suppress our natural response to something that feels dangerous or terrible, it's not okay. We need to have our feelings. Our feelings are wisdom. Our feelings are important. Like, and I look at this man and having known him a bit, I'm like, but I can see your anger would be like this beautiful life energy. I'm not talking about violent anger. I'm talking about life energy that moves through you that takes action. And this
Mhm.
country has been, you can see the polarization of anger, the suppression of so much where we're not taking action, and then the overactive anger in another direction. And it's like, whoa. So when you're talking about confronting this stuff, I'm all about it.
Mhm.
And I think it's time to be willing to walk through the darkness into the light. It's willing to confront our shadow. I
Mhm.
think this is when we need to have deeper conversations and look at like, what am I avoiding? Because the collective doesn't change until we change on a personal level. And I remember, and how this translates on an individual level, you've said to some of this, but I remember going through my own death and rebirth, and I was suicidal at the time. And one of the hardest parts for me that I was navigating, and I bring this up also, what I want to say is I have heard several people say they don't want to be here or they want to die.
Mhm.
And this has just been in the past week and a half,
Yep.
that there's something happening here. Just so I want to validate that what you're saying is happening in the astrology, and I'm hearing it. I'm hearing people feel the astrology.
Mhm.
So going back to when I was suicidal, one of the things I really had to confront was the death of narratives about myself that weren't true. Death
Mhm.
of shame-based narratives that I was taught, that I wasn't valuable, I was not lovable, I was ugly, I wasn't good, I was selfish. Um, my goodness actually lived in my shadow. And it was
Mhm.
so hard for me to believe that I was good. And I
Mhm.
remember, and it sounds like, really? Like, but living and believing in my goodness felt so dangerous. But part of
Mhm.
my rebirth was, first of all, deciding, am I going to walk through this to the other side? Can I be here? Do I want to be here and walk through this? And I was like, yes. But I
Mhm.
also had to embrace my goodness and I had to start developing a relationship to it. And I think there are a lot of people that could probably resonate with that. I think a lot of goodness lives in the shadow. And
Yeah.
I also want to normalize that sometimes you want to die. And our
Mhm.
unwillingness to speak about death and our unwillingness to speak about wanting to die isolates us so much. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean you want to kill yourself. It doesn't
Right.
mean you actually are going to do something about it. Being able to say to somebody, I feel so bad, I want to die, and having the person listen and hold it and not panic is
Hmm.
really important. We need to be able to say these things to each other and feel safe and loved and held. That's where transformation happens. And our
Absolutely.
refusal to look at it, our refusal to listen, our need to panic over all of this, is keeping us stuck.
I think we forget, and we're so disconnected from that light, from the source light within, that we forget just how much power we have. And
Yes.
newsflash, if you are on a spiritual path, your death and rebirth experiences, you're going to feel them more.
Woo,
Laugh. I don't know why I laugh. Um because it helps. I don't know, but
because it's true. And you get to the point where you embrace it, right? You embrace it. I'm going through another rebirth right now, but it'll never be as bad as it was during the initial one.
that right, because you have wisdom. You've
Mhm.
you've it's almost like you've been there, done that. Now, it isn't pleasant.
No.
It's it still has its moments of confusion, right? But what you become good at over time is being able to discern the voices that are speaking, the parts of
Yes.
you that are leaving, and the parts of you that are trying to emerge.
Yes.
We're talking about these things in the way that we are because these are very true processes that I think more people than not experience, but just don't have the words for it.
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about the desire to die, I will be very honest. Over the last month, I've kind of, that voice at night has been very loud. I just
Mm.
want, I just want to fucking die. Right.
Mm.
And what I did one night, I said, okay, then die. I let you die. I
Mm.
release you. I understand that you want to die because this world feels so heavy. I would not want to live this existence either if I carried the belief systems that you do.
Mm.
So rest in peace. I love you so, so much, and I let you go. These are the things that
Beautiful.
we have to understand are part of a spiritual path. Because every time that happens, you are getting closer and closer to the light that you carry within, and to
Mm.
allow those parts of you to die, to
Well,
allow them to,
that's a good that's a good thing to say, that there was a part of you that wanted to die, like a part of your
right?
ego.
Yeah. And I knew that. I know that now,
Mhm.
right? Maybe years ago I didn't know that.
Mhm.
I never attempted anything, but I did identify with that voice. And now I know that at least, and we have to remember our journey, the things we've talked about, the decisions we've made, the things we've let go of, the things we've surrendered in order to get closer to ourselves. Because when we do, we recognize, oh, that I'm ready to let go of that part of myself. That
Mm.
part of myself wants to grip on to the things that it has felt safe with for many, many years.
Mm.
That's not, I don't need that anymore.
Mm.
And so these are the parts that aren't touched on and spoken about in sound bites,
No.
right? They're not attractive. They're not appealing to the immediate eye, to someone's immediate attention. And so it's no fucking wonder we have so many people out in the world feeling the way they do, numbing in the way that they are, doing all the things that they're doing.
No wonder.
So much of spirituality is about being present with the parts of you that are wanting to die.
Mm.
Because spirituality, I think, is a journey of shedding all of those layers that keep you from the light that you carry within.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like you explained it so well, reminding people that not all of us wants to die, that there's a part, and that you could say to that, Rest in peace. I let you go. I release you. You don't have to be there. And often it's a child part, that has been, that can't survive. It's not like you're putting your inner child to rest. You're just letting that part of you that doesn't know how to be in this world go to sleep and be at peace.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to remember that, like, not all of you wants to die. But the problem is those egoic parts are so loud. And we as a culture identify with the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our topic is like, why spirituality is such a turnoff. And I think it's such a turnoff is because it doesn't acknowledge often, not always, but in those sound bites, like you're speaking, it just looks so blissful. It's like erotic and sexy and like so easy. And I'm like, ugh, I just want to throw up. Like this idea that spiritual people should look a certain way. Like we need to buy certain like jewelry or accoutrement. I don't know what I'm saying, I don't know,
Yes.
outfits, hats. I don't know what it is, but it's just like, that's not spirituality. Like spirituality is not what you look like. You shouldn't look at a person other than seeing their light and feeling their light and know that they're spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't mean anything what someone looks like. You can't say by the way someone looks, oh, they're a really spiritual person. No, you see it because you feel it standing next to them or looking in their eyes. Their soul's light is emanating from them and the way they walk their path. And it's not a perfect path. Spirituality is not perfection.
Mm-mm.
And there's so much of that toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just such a bypass. It's like, oh, just trust and everything will be okay. Yes, but that's not exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
Like it's walking, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. It's tending to the human heart as we walk through this life that is very challenging and trusting in the bigger energy that we are a part of and that we are held and supported. And this is more purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have
While
to say? Yeah,
while we have to work and pay rent and pay bills, and
exactly.
you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
here's the thing, right? I don't understand how there can be room for anything that is for anything else other than living your life and being mindful of your spiritual experience in this life. Like
Mhm.
when you focus on that,
Right.
literally no room for anything else.
Right.
No room for bullshit, no room for to care what people think, what people say. Like, and that's that. I want to name that because I think, again, from an astrological perspective, we have had a ton of lessons around self-worth, value, what are our values as individuals, and how do the relationships in our life support that or not,
Mhm.
right? So it's one thing for the astrology to be presented in a way, your relationships have changed a lot, and maybe you're not friends with the people you used to be friends with. Okay, but why? What does that
Mhm.
mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your experience? Who are you becoming? Who are
Mhm.
you becoming that has outgrown those types of connections? Uh, what part of you has died, right? We
Mhm.
go back to that. I think it's important to ask deeper questions,
Yes.
not just of what we consume, but of ourselves, and not in a way where we're tearing ourselves down or being judgmental, but when we inquire beyond how am I feeling, how can anything else be more important?
Mhm.
How can anything outside of that path take up more space and time?
Mhm.
And I'm very certain that I'm speaking from a place where I have chosen that to be my life.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that everyone has to live their life in the way that I do, but I think that when you remain focused and steady, and you don't even have to call it spirituality, I think that you can just remain focused and steady and being mindful and present in your life. Oh, there is so much there. There is an endless, there's limitlessness there, and not limitlessness in terms of gaining anything material, but in getting to know who you really are.
Yes.
But we have to be willing to eliminate distractions that, quite frankly, are just pointless.
Well, and I think someone might look at like, well, spirituality is full of sacrifice and it looks so boring and all these things. And again, the whole point has been missed. As I've gotten, as I've gotten, as I've developed a more intentional relationship to my soul, and I've tended to my human experience, and I've really come to my spiritual practice is so important to me, and it's so beautiful to me, and it's the thing that's like oxygen in this
Mhm,
life.
mhm.
And what I've noticed is as that relationship and my mental and emotional and spiritual well-being is a priority, I don't want to do anything to separate me from my soul. I don't want to drink.
Right.
I don't want to eat certain foods that don't make me feel good. Like I don't want anything to get in the way of that connection. Like
Mhm.
even sleep, protecting my sleep because I'm just better when I sleep. I'm better when I don't put toxins in my body. To me, it's not boring at all. I'm actually happier than I've ever been. I experience more joy than I've ever experienced. This
Right.
idea that, like, oh God, it drives me crazy. Like, since I've stopped drinking, all I can see is like how drinking is sold to us. This is a good time. This is sexy. And again, nothing against drinking.
Right.
And we have to look at like, is that our identity? Is that how we identify with a good time? And is that the
Mhm.
only way we identify with a good time by dissociating from ourselves?
Mhm.
Right? And how do we dissociate from ourselves? Through social media, through drinking, through drugs, through sex, through, and I'm not talking about regular sex, you know what I'm talking about, through shopping, consumerism, all the ways we create distance from ourselves because we don't want to be with ourselves.
Right.
And what I'm here to say is the more you come closer to yourself, the more time you spend with yourself and you get to know yourself on a different in a different way,
Mhm.
these deaths and rebirths are actually beautiful. The initial
Mhm.
stage feels awful and it's like, oh, again. And then it's like, actually, I'm up for it. I'm here for it.
Right.
And life is incredibly magical and beautiful. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to miss it.
Right. I have in our notes, life itself is a spiritual practice. I can't remember if you said that or if I said that, but it
I think we
just,
both agree.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what we are getting at here. Life
Mhm.
itself is a spiritual practice.
Yes.
And it's such a, if you approach your inner world with curiosity, you will be amazed at the things that you find. There's so much
Mhm.
magic within, because spirituality doesn't just have to be the death and rebirth process.
No.
There's so much light. There's so much, you come to understand just how much you are held and sustained. You come to understand just how supported you are. You come to shatter this idea that you're alone.
Mm.
None of us are ever alone. And
No.
think about how we live in a world where so many decisions are made from this fear of being alone,
Mm.
from a place of loneliness,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. Isolation, loneliness.
And I don't know, I feel like I keep getting tired of kind of explaining myself in terms of it's not like we haven't been here. Uh, but I do find the need to say that sometimes, because if you find that there are some of the things that we're saying that uh, feel like there's a resistance, I invite you to get curious about it. And I say that about the part of being alone because I think that there are a lot of people out there who want to defend that,
Mhm.
want to defend the, oh, but that's not why I'm doing this, or that's not why I'm in this relationship, or that's not, well, is it?
Mm.
Isn't it?
Mhm.
I think that is one of the things that I've noticed a lot. We're in a we're in a world where being alone is seen as like this really awful thing. And I think that it's just a greater calling to go within.
Mm.
It's just a greater calling to connect with that part of yourself. And I can understand how difficult that is. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the opportunity. That's an opportunity.
Mm.
To find yourself with time and space is an opportunity to connect with yourself in a way that you never have. Instead of continually looking for something or someone outside of you to choose you, to pick you, to just squeeze you of your sacred energy. There's a wholeness in all of us. And I think our lifelong journey is to tap into it, create a relationship with it.
Yes. And if someone's listening, I think it's important, like they might say, well, I don't know how to start, and we've probably said this in so many podcasts. But if loneliness, for example, is something you struggle to be present for,
Mm-hmm.
then go to a therapist or a coach. Have someone sit with you while you tap into the feeling of loneliness if you can't do it by yourself. And a lot of the problem is so many of these difficult feelings we don't know how to sit with, we don't know how to be with, but they are a gateway to our heart. They're a gateway to the connection to our soul. They're a gateway to truth. They're a gateway, and we are not taught this. And it drives me crazy that we are taught to don't talk about that, don't feel this. And, same thing with
Yeah.
death, but, don't talk about feeling lonely. Don't feel lonely. Well, you feel lonely. Whether you're talking about it or not, it's your experience. It's like
Right.
my friend in my neighborhood, whether you're talking about being angry, you're angry,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're taking something to suppress it. And so when we learn to confront or sit with or love those parts of us that are struggling and to be present with them, and again, sometimes you might need someone to help you do that. I know I did.
Mm-hmm.
I could not sit with my shame unless I had someone sitting with me for years. And then I learned to sit with it on my own. And sitting with those dark parts of yourself, that's a game changer. Once you
Mm-hmm.
can do that, it's not that you will feel good all the time. Those feelings will arise, but if you can learn to sit with them, life will get so much easier. We're refusing a part of the human experience that's really a privilege. That's why we're here. If we
Oof.
were here for all light and love, we wouldn't have come here to be human. We have the privilege of experiencing the spectrum of emotions from shame to joy and all the things. But we have been taught that there's a part of that experience that's bad. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're disconnecting from ourselves. And so we have this expectation we should feel good all the time. The pursuit of happiness. Oh my God, it makes me want to throw up.
Right.
I'm not joking. Like, this is so
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
So stepping and tapping into your spirituality, I would say one of the first steps is learning to be with the parts of you that are so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Would you
And
agree? I'm curious.
yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. 1,000%. Yes. To everything you said. Because I go back to we are so disconnected from the knowing of the light that we are.
Yes.
And here's I think where like things get blurry and perhaps misinterpreted or miscommunicated. At our core, we really are love and light. Like at our core, we are unconditional love.
Yes.
But the human experience is such that we came to experience everything to find our way back to that.
Mm.
So we can't just say, I can't just sit here and say, oh, but you're light and love. That doesn't count. All that stuff is not real. No, that is just as real. All of the stuff we're talking about is just as real as the fact that we are all love and light. But
Yes.
all of that is necessary to move through in order to truly understand what that love and light and unconditional wholeness that exists within us actually is.
Mm.
That's
Yes.
where there is this I don't, like I said, either misinterpretation or miscommunication of it.
I think it's both. And I was going to ask you, like, where do you feel like this woo and this bypass, like, I feel like it's not only a misinterpretation, I feel like people actually say that and it's dangerous. That it is all just love and light and just focus on that and you'll be okay. And so I wanted to ask you, like, because, people say, oh, it's God, the woo, and I was just curious what you would say about it.
I think it's a few things. I think one, it's, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, is there's a lot of ego around spirituality. So it looks a certain way, it dresses a certain way, it has a certain aesthetic on social media, you go to certain places, it looks like a lot of things, right? Now, maybe that's that person's journey to getting to the light of themselves. Maybe one day they will realize that they don't need any of that, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't. I think another reason why it gets misinterpreted and misinformed is that we have lost touch with ceremony. We've lost touch with
Mm-hmm.
our connection to nature. We've lost touch with uh, the connection to God has been so fucked up for centuries because of religion and patriarchy that we have made God to be this thing that it is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is at the root of us not understanding our connection to God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it. Right.
Yes.
I think that, quite frankly, I think colonialism has a lot to do with it too.
Yes.
I was brought up with a lot of practices where my connection to spirit got to look like prayer, or got to look like moments of being with myself with certain rituals, right? And it was diminished to woo.
Mm.
So there are a lot of things here that we have. This is why it becomes so important. We don't have to understand these things at the scale at which I'm talking about. These are things that I've come to realize throughout many years of observation and experience. But this is why it becomes so important that we ask much more profound questions of ourselves. Because in those questions, then we're going to come to certain conclusions of how the hell did we get so disconnected from it?
Yeah.
And that's how we will be able to, I think, tap into the authenticity of our spirituality, the truth, the root, the core of our path, of our journey.
Mm. Well, as someone who grew up as a Christian fundamentalist, and I'm no longer that, but one of the first things you're told is that you are a sinner, that you are below God, and I know in Buddhism, that's one of the few, not, I don't want to say few, but it's a religion that doesn't teach you that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so dangerous that you, this beautiful light being, you come into this world and your family and your culture, if you're and this is our country, while there's many religions here, there
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of Christianity. And so there's a lot of people that grew up in that. And the first thing is their family holds them as you are a sinner, you're bad. Your whole life is about learning to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, to have that at your core,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this doesn't happen for everybody, but for a large group of people, that is so awful to me that you grow up feeling that you are bad beneath God and shameful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then I think about the people of other cultures that had their beautiful practices taken away or diminished to woo because they were outside of that religion or they were misunderstood. And those rituals and practices are vital to a healthy spiritual relationship. They're so vital. Like I said, they're oxygen. And to take those away from people or to diminish those is heartbreaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And ritual in your spiritual practice, whatever it is, like I just went outside. I was feeling really angsty today. And I just went outside and I have all these dahlias blooming. And there were like 7 bumblebees just in the dahlias. And that was my spiritual practice. I just
Mm-hmm.
gazed upon them and I just was in awe of them. And I said, thank you just for letting me be with you. Thank you to the dahlias for blooming. And that was just me like being with. And I
Right.
went and I put my hands in the earth and I just said, thank you, Mama Earth. Thank you for holding me. I'm feeling so anxious today. I looked at the flowers and I said, thank you for blooming. They're all little miracles to me. And that was my spiritual practice before I got on this call.
Right.
Like we need rituals, we need meaning to our daily lives. It's so important. And another thing you touched on is like spirituality doesn't have to look like anything. It's personal. And
Mm-hmm.
we lump like we make it look a certain way on social media. It's like, oh, it should look like this. No, what your spirituality looks like is very different from mine, and it doesn't matter. Like we
Right.
don't we how beautiful it is to meet in community, but we don't have to gather together in a building to be spiritual people. We can be spiritual people together doing different things. We can come together and do similar things, but it's such a personal relationship and it's no one's business, and no one has the right to take it away from you or
Mm-hmm.
to diminish it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. That's all I can say.
I I 1,000% agree. It's we've gotten so far away from the fact that spirituality is a moment to moment experience. It's
Yes.
the now. It's how present are you when you're doing the dishes,
Mhm.
right? Can you be with yourself in that moment? Can you just be with yourself in that moment? Can
Mhm.
you breathe and find just a moment, 3 dishes worth of a moment
Yes.
of just being with the
Yes.
dishes,
The
right?
laundry.
Right? Can you pour your cup of coffee and feel gratitude for the fact that you're pouring yourself a cup of coffee in the morning, right? When you go on your walks, can you just be with yourself?
Mm.
Can you just be with your body? Can you check in? I know that a lot of people like to listen to podcasts. And if you listen to our podcast while you're walking, thank you so much.
Yes.
And I'm personally someone who I hate being on my phone with headphones when I walk.
Me too.
That's my connection to me. I do body checks, right? I'm just with myself. It's that. That's really what it is.
And then you're not always peaceful. That's
No.
the other thing that drives me crazy
Right.
is that to be a spiritual person, you have to peacefully meditate for 45 minutes to 2 hours to 3 hours sitting in the same position. We've talked about this before. That's part of it if you want.
Hmm.
And your walk in your park, it can be anything. And if you're like today, I was like all over the place, chaotic. And I was like, my spiritual practice is noticing that I'm chaotic and putting my hands in the earth and watching the bees.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not perfection. It's
No,
not utter silence or stillness.
it changes a lot over time.
Sometimes it is stillness and bliss.
Right. And,
Sometimes.
right. And sometimes it's not.
And
So it's,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think I say that it changes over time. I think um, a few years ago, I had a really difficult time transitioning out of meditating every single morning, early in the morning. That
Mhm.
was my thing for a while. I used to get up really early in the morning and meditate for an hour, hour and a half.
Oh,
And I
wow.
had experiences and it was really beautiful. And then all of a sudden, like, it got to the point where I said to myself, this isn't working. What's happening? Why? Like, and I have a friend who at the time said, what if it's just changing? And when she said that to me, I felt so liberated. That was ego. That was my
Mhm.
ego holding on to, if I
Yes.
meditate for an hour and a half every morning, then I'm spiritual, right?
Yes. You're doing it right. That's
Exactly.
the other thing I hear. I just feel like I'm not doing it right or I'm not doing it enough. Like
Right.
literally, I'll put my feet in the pool sometimes and I'll feel the cool water. And that's my spiritual practice sometimes for the day.
Hmm.
It's it's touching in as often as you can.
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
remind yourself that there's something so much more than your ego and your busy mind.
Yeah.
It's a reminder. And sometimes putting my feet in the pool is my breath and this reminder that I am a spiritual being. Like those sensual things are very helpful for me.
Absolutely. I found when you brought this topic up, I found the conversation so important to have because from an astrological perspective, we're really entering between now, late 2024, and by the time we get to 2027, I think we will really be in what will feel like a completely different world. I don't
Mm,
know how. I don't know that anyone can say how, but from an astrological perspective, with so many planets moving in the way that they are in ways that they haven't in a very long time, that's what that tells us, right? When we
mm,
read those patterns, that's what those patterns tell us. My hope is that if we can see this coming, no matter what it looks like in our physical reality, can we move into it from a place where we are much more liberated from anything outside of us that tells us who we need to be,
mm,
and really begin to go hand in hand with with the self, with a high with the capital S, right?
mm,
Can we let go of those constructs with Pluto and Capricorn of how to do certain things and begin to question, but how does that feel to me?
right.
And it's like, and if I personally love that question. I feel like or when people say like I feel like I'm doing it wrong, because that's an opportunity for you to liberate yourself. There is no wrong.
Right.
Anything that denies anything that denies the shadow of the human experience is probably not the best, right?
Right.
So spirituality is about understanding that if unconditional love does exist within us, and discovering that, and having a felt sense experience of that, then everything that makes you you is on purpose.
Mm,
Everything, everything, always in all the ways.
mm.
That's why I think this conversation is so important right now. It's such a sensitive time, I feel.
And I think before we close, that's a really good thing to acknowledge is that it's really normal if you feel unsettled. It's really normal if you're unsure of how to take a step forward. It's really normal if you feel, I think, anxious and a little lost. I think
Hmm.
that's normal. If you feel a little scared, I think it's normal. I think anything you feel is okay, right? Anything you feel is okay. It's just an opportunity to ask more questions and ask yourself why. And this is a beautiful time. The energy, as unsettling as it can feel, it is a beautiful time to start asking bigger questions and start developing that relationship to yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and I also feel that the more, whatever your spirituality looks like, whatever your relationship to self looks like, if we don't start turning towards ourselves in the sense that our heart and souls, then it's going to be really hard for us to have compassion and heal this collective. Because remember, we are one energy and we have to start here. I can't go, well, you did this, or you chose this, or what about you? The more I do that, the more I just kick the can farther down the road. I cannot be responsible for what anyone else has done.
Right.
I can be responsible for how I tend to how it makes me feel.
Hmm.
And I can be responsible for how I care for myself right now. And I believe so strongly that if we learn to love and care for ourselves and create a relationship with ourselves in this way, then the way we move forward will be more loving, more healing, more connective, less othering, less separation,
Hmm.
less disconnection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like I said, it's an important time, and setting the intention to move forward differently can be something really powerful, because to transition out of the way that we used to do life, approach people, approach problems, approach ourselves, will only prove outdated. Will only
Right.
prove, inadequate. What's the word? Um, it won't work.
It won't work.
It won't work.
It won't
It won't
work.
work. That's a good sign. That's a good sign that you're being gifted with the opportunity to not just figure it out, but to go within
Yes.
and get curious about that, about what that means. And know that if you set the intention, I want to go within and I don't really know what the hell that means, spirit is like, oh, I've been waiting for that. I got you. Here's what
Yes.
it looks like.
Yes. Yes.
It's not that serious in terms of like the rules of the game, and yet it's so important.
Well, and one thing I forgot to say is that as you do all this, also, like, as you tend to this relationship, you start to see life and nature and other beings and other creatures and the world in a completely different way. It's as if your whole lens is transformed and you see beauty and magic everywhere. And you also see the darkness, but you can hold it all. You don't just see, like, oh, everything's light and love, but you see the reason and the purpose. But the other thing is you recognize that we are all interconnected. And you
Hmm.
recognize that creatures and animals and trees and water and all of it is life. All of it is part of the same energy. And you begin to have reverence for it. But
Hmm.
you can't have reverence for something unless you have reverence for yourself and reverence for your own life. I mean, people try, they like to have a lot of compassion for others before they have themselves. But when you get down to it, it ends up just being people pleasing and codependency to keep themselves safe. Right.
Right.
But when you have true reverence for your own human existence, that's when you understand that you can have reverence for everything.
Hmm. That's beautiful. That feels complete.
That feels complete. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do want to invite any questions. If anybody has any questions that arise or anything that they would like to share, I would like to invite that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the best way to get a hold of us, the easiest way, is through our Instagram,
Mhm.
uh, and through our DMs there. Is there anything that you're currently offering or anything that's coming up?
Not right now. No.
Not right now. Yeah. I am still holding my year ahead readings. Those will probably go through the end of January. Um, I will start offering spiritual coaching soon again. So keep an eye out for that if that's something that you're interested in. And yeah, check out my YouTube weekly forecast.
So
Uh,
good.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you all. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be updated on new videos.
Click the video on screen to watch more episodes.